Well, hello friends and fans everywhere. Once again, it is your fitness captain Jason speaking. Hope everybody is having a great day. So far here in Hamilton, Ontario, it is absolutely glorious, beautiful, positively sublime day today. Yes. Today I want to talk about the UFO phenomenon to address to my friends and fans out there and anybody else who may be interested, because I hope you will be interested. It is a very multifaceted, complex, multi-layered subject and very, very important. I think it is one of the most important subjects in our times, and I'm going to tell you why and explain in a minute. So, first of all, let's start in 1857, I believe. We had the airship mysteries. Those were some sort of ships that were actually floating in the skies when it wasn't supposed to be. That was about 5 years before the Wright brothers flew the airplane. And to this day, nobody's sure who that was, but I believe it was obviously some secret society. It wasn't aliens, probably to do with the Germans. Now, we're going to speak about the Germans in a moment, because so that was 1857, but then in the 1930s, that's when the Germans, of course, were working on all kinds of different propulsion systems. It is a well-known fact the Germans were way ahead of the Russians and the US and everybody. They had a lot of brilliant scientists, and they were working on a project called the Bell. It was shaped like a bell. It levitated. It didn't fly, but it was seen by concentration survivors. This is all very well documented. All the scientists that worked on this project were actually killed. And they were killed, unfortunately, because the Germans, they had this project more secret, more highly classified than even the atom bomb. It was the most highly classified program that they had. And what they were working on was anti-gravity, I believe, and plasma and torsion physics. Now, Joseph P. Farrell, who's an amazing prolific author. I've talked about him in other videos. I don't know if you've seen my other videos, but he has books like this, the Giza Death Star Destroyed. And he has about 50, I'd say 40, at least 40 books out. He's only 50 years old. He must shoot out a book every month. But he's a great author. He has an amazing website as well called Giza Death Star. And if I sound serious in my face, friends and fans, it's just because it's a serious subject. But seriously, his website, Giza Death Star, what a cool name, isn't it, guys? I think is one of the most interesting and, again, profound websites in the world today, I think. He's a scholar. He's a historian. He's got a brilliant mind. He covers the weird stuff. He covers the UFO phenomenon, the secret space program that we've had in place for decades, which I'm going to talk about shortly. He tries to cover the trillions of dollars, find out where are these trillions of dollars that are going missing every year. And I'm going to also hopefully speak about that a little bit later in this video. So Joseph P. Farrell, he has studied about the German technologies and what the Germans were working on. He's got a book actually dedicated basically to the Bell Project and what that was all about, the technologies that they were working on, the documents that support this. So it was amazing stuff, because the Germans were making breakthroughs. This Bell Project, whatever propulsion technologies that they were working on, they knew they were going to make breakthroughs, or had made a breakthrough at that time. It had major ramifications, in other words, for future technologies. And we sort of know this because, well, let me just put it this way. So then in the 1930s, the Germans took out 3 expeditions, at least, to Tibet and Antarctica. They went to Antarctica several times. They ended up putting, ultimately, Nazi flags all over the place in Antarctica. They took topography, surveillance photos all over Antarctica. We all know the Germans, the elitists, were very much into the esoteric and secret societies, right? So I think they went to Antarctica, obviously, to see if Atlantis, the civilization of Atlantis, was down there, because in the Reis map, I believe it's called R-E-I-Y-E-S, it's a Turkish map, they show Antarctica with no ice. Whether it was 100,000 years ago, a million years ago, nobody's sure exactly when, But at one point, Antarctica had no ice, and there's circumstantial evidence that Atlantis very well may have been in the location of Antarctica. So I think it very well may be a couple miles underneath the ice. And I know that the U.S. and other countries, they have found something earth-shattering in Antarctica. And I'm going to get to that in a moment too. So in the 1930s, the Germans went to Antarctica. We don't know what they found. They kept it hush-hush. They very well may have found an ancient civilization. They were definitely building bases shortly thereafter underneath the ice. And at that time, the U.S. Are now down there and have been there for decades, as well as Russia, you know, China, the big countries, the powerful countries. Scientists are going down there, of course, for environmental research and so on. But in 1947, friends and fans, I'm going to jump to 1947 now. We had, of course, the infamous Operation High Jump. I don't know how many of you know about it. It's a very famous operation that took place under Admiral Byrd of the U.S. He took about 4,000 troops with a destroyer. They had submarines, airplanes on the ships. It was just a huge flotilla fleet of military. And everybody was wondering at the time, why is Admiral Byrd, the U.S., why are they bringing all this military to Antarctica? I mean, it was crazy. And the cover story was something like, I don't know, they were saying they're going to build Little America and look around in Antarctica. I mean, it made no sense. They obviously knew there were openings in Antarctica, I believe, of caverns or underground bases. They probably suspected the Germans were down there. Again, we're not talking about aliens, friends and fans. So it's called Operation High Jump. And Admiral Byrd had press on the ship, and he made a very, very peculiar statement, a few of them. And basically, he was interviewed on the ship, or actually before he came back to the U.S., he knew he was going to be debriefed when he got home. So I think this is why he gave some information to this interviewer from, I think it was called the El Mercurio Santiago Chilean newspaper, Chilean reporter. And he said they were attacked. This is all reported too, friends and fans. The ships were attacked by, they didn't use the term UFOs back then, but he said basically by discs that came out of the ice, and the reports that they shot lasers to the soldiers. And it's a known fact that hundreds of U.S. soldiers died in this attack. Now, Admiral Byrd never specified who the enemy was, but he said that this enemy can fly from pole to pole at extreme speeds, basically in no time. So that in itself is a miraculous statement. And the reason is, of course, you and I, we all know that back then, no conventional aircraft that we had, no conventional aircraft can fly from pole to pole. They have to refuel, right? It takes them forever. So that was an amazing statement. Now, I believe the enemy he was referring to was a German society, that the Germans, for whatever reason, did not want them to be found out by the U.S. that they were in Antarctica. They attacked these ships, and so Admiral Byrd had to hike out of there and go back home. So also in 1947, there was so much that happened, folks, friends and fans, in 1947. We had, of course, Roswell, the crash at New Mexico, Roswell, that famous crash. And, you know, a lot of ufologists like to jump on the alien bandwagon. Even when it comes to Roswell, they'll say, oh, you know, so-and-so, we have testimonials that it was, you know, we found alien bodies, these charred bodies, you know, that were deformed. They very well may have found some deformed bodies, but friends and fans, that could have been from, you know, the crazy Stalin from Russia, who was working on all kinds of horrendous experiments on human beings. And, you know, I wouldn't put it past him that he actually put deformed bodies in the ship and sent it to Roswell. Nobody knows who it was exactly, but I actually tend to think it was Germans, and Joseph P. Farrell agrees that if you connect the dots, that certain U.S. Military actually suspected it was German technology as well. So it was very high technology. And so that was in 1947, and shortly after, Truman actually, you know, created the national security state, which involved the CIA, NSA, you know, FBI, all this intelligent apparatus, and a lot of secrecy, therefore. And of course, it's all tied in with the military-industrial complex. He created the national security state, I believe, in a large part to try to get a handle on this UFO phenomenon, whatever it was, and whoever had this technologies, right? And again, I believe it started from the Germans. And in 1947, what else did we do? Well, in 1947, if you recall, the United States had Operation Paperclip, in which they brought back many of the German scientists, the brilliant minds of German scientists, and Russia got some as well. So we had thousands of German scientists come over to the U.S., working on projects, living a comfortable lifestyle, actually a very nice lifestyle. And it's a shame because a lot of those guys were evil, that some of them worked on, and we brought in, you know, some of the people that took control of the concentration camps and so forth. It's a shame, you know, we give them a beautiful lifestyle because they're working on technologies for the military. That's a hidden secret there that's not talked about much. But anyway, that's part of our history, friends and fans. I'm trying to tell you guys about this. So, Operation Paperclip, I always say that the programs of the 1930s gave rise to the Dark Fleet, which, in other words, when we brought those paperclip scientists to work on those technologies back that started in the 1930s, as I say, that really amped up technological progress. We were able to get revolutionary technological progress from that time, especially in 1947, when we started bringing those scientists and working on these technologies. And then in the 1950s, we know this because in 1954, what happened? Everybody knows, if you do any research, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people to this day have seen pictures of those weird flying discs or objects above Washington, D.C., above the White House. And they weren't supposed to be there. They were these weird lights of aircraft, some sort of disc or flying UFOs above Washington, D.C. It was amazing. And there's pictures of it. Anybody can YouTube it. This is a well-known fact. And I believe that was the military showing their might, showing what we can do. This is the technology that we have. We've made this breakthrough. I believe it was in anti-gravity. And they showed themselves above Washington, D.C., which is the most secure airspace. You're not supposed to be able to allow any objects to go into the airspace and go above, you know, the Washington Capitol. So that was pretty interesting and amazing. So in 1947, again, we had Operation Paperclip. We had, I said, Operation High Jump as well in Antarctica. So there was a lot going on. And then what happened in 1963, of course, John F. Kennedy tells the world, we're going to the moon, right? And we took those Saturn V rockets to the moon with the astronauts, which was an amazing accomplishment. But friends and fans, you guys, most people forget the military is always 30 to 50 years ahead of the general public. So I argue, even when Kennedy took the astronauts, I should say, went to the moon under Kennedy, I believe the military-industrial complex, at least certain factions, mostly Germans, were already up on the moon, believe it or not. And they've been going ever since. And the reason I say this is, there was a woman named Carol Rosen. She was very high up in NASA. I believe her name's Carol Rosen. I'll double check that. But she has a lot of intellectual integrity and honesty. And she told the story, secondhand information, that she heard Neil Armstrong behind closed doors basically saying, in so many words, they saw a huge menacing aircraft on the moon. And basically he said they were warned off. So, and I mean, Armstrong's not the only one, friends and fans. Many, many astronauts have said they have seen unidentified flying objects following them and seeing them in space from the windows. And you can see this on YouTube channels. Anybody can see this, friends and fans, on the STS missions, on different missions. Many of them, you'll see unidentified UFOs zipping along in space, and they're not supposed to be there. It's just unreal. And NASA, of course, they don't want you to see these things. So they try to, you know, in other videos where you see other UFOs in space too, they try to go on to something else or direct the cameras. But it's very, very, very visible. We even had, there was a young man, unfortunately, that had to live in a wheelchair for his whole adult life. He had a wife, and he was bedridden in a wheelchair. And his obsession, all he did 24/7 basically, was try to find UFOs in space, unidentified flying objects. And again, you know, you get certain ufologists that will say, oh, it's got to be aliens. It must be aliens. We're being visited. I wish. I also have a romantic chiasma in me, as I like to say. I wish we were being visited by aliens, you know, and I do hope there's life out there in the universe. There must be. I don't know if there's other intelligent life. We don't know how often that spawns up. That's a whole other conversation that we'll have one day, but I'll talk about astronomy, my intellectual personal journey. But again, this guy in the wheelchair, he found literally thousands of different UFOs in space on different videos. Anybody can see this. And Richard Dolan, another prolific author, a great historian who covers the UFO phenomenon for quite a few years now, he has got, from the wife, thankfully, he got the rights to these videos of these UFOs in space. And so again, the astronauts, they can't say too much about what they've seen in space or on the moon. Again, the deep state, the governments, will not allow them to say too much. Either they'll be killed possibly, or they're at least threatened. This is a well-known fact. So, and a lot of the astronauts, there's circumstantial evidence that they actually go through like an MK Ultra experiments from the government in which their memories are wiped out. Because if you recall, even the astronaut that recently died, what was his name? Oh my God, I can't remember his name. But anyway, he was one of the astronauts that also said he couldn't remember what it was like to be on the moon. He couldn't remember the feelings. And reporters at the time, years ago, asked him, "You couldn't remember the feeling that you had on the moon, being off-world? Are you?" So that was really, really strange. You would think you would remember the ecstasy or whatever you were feeling to be on the moon. I mean, what a profound moment that would have been. So that was very strange. Oh, that was Edgar Mitchell that couldn't remember what it was like on the moon. So I believe that's an indication of what they call MK Ultra. MK Ultra, if you recall, friends and fans, back decades ago, the military did MK Ultra. This is all documented now. The CIA had to come out with it because whistleblowers came out with the truth about what was going on with this experiment from CIA, the intelligence services, with MK Ultra. They would take literally kids out of classrooms and people from all over the United States and do horrendous experiments on their brain. I mean, it's just unreal. And again, it's not talked about a whole lot, but again, it's part of the history. So, and whenever I talk about the military, friends and fans, I always want to qualify it by saying there's a lot of good military out there. I'm sure there's even some really good elitists out there to do with the military. But I'm stating the facts that, for example, we got way too much secrecy to do with the military-industrial complex. And I think a lot of if you talk to military, they will agree with that. That, with the CIA, the NSA, the national security state, with the military been going out of control for decades, we have way too much secrecy. Too much secrecy breeds corruption. And with this free energy, whatever these UFOs, whatever technologies they're relying on, it is not rockets, folks. This is probably anti-gravity, in which it's not really anti-gravity, it's called manipulating the gravity systems, which is they use the term anti-gravity, but what it means is, obviously they're not using rocket fuel, and what happens is, these UFOs, when you see it in space, and again, anybody can YouTube it, I highly suggest, friends and fans, you look, you'll see these UFOs, they go thousands of miles an hour, they can turn right angles, you'll see them literally turn right angles, which no conventional aircraft can do, and the speeds and the way these UFOs turn, of course, the pilots would be killed by the G-forces. They'd rip you apart. But whatever these UFOs are relying on, the way they're able to manipulate gravity, it's like researchers think, some researchers, that they can manipulate gravity. Basically, they're doing it by about 80–85%. So when you do that, the pilot, all he will feel, or he or she will feel, is a bump, doing these amazing moves. So it's unbelievable. And speaking of technologies, friends and fans, and speaking about these UFOs in space and going to the moon, we've got glass structures on the moon. If you, again, go to the videos, friends and fans, we've got all kinds of anomalous structures, it looks like, sticking out of the moon. It looks like antennas, the buildings, and glass is supposed to be stronger, by the way, with the moon's surface without the oxygen. So it's probably glass. And again, NASA tries to airbrush this out, but you can still see what looks like glass structures all over the moon. And tunnels on the moon, I'm telling you, they're mining the moon, friends and fans. Why haven't we been back to the moon? I mean, so many people wonder too, why have we only had a couple moon missions? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because the military keep going up there. They're taking huge payloads on shuttles. on these huge black triangles that have been seen all over the world. We had the Belgium flap, I believe in the, what was that, in the 1990s, I think. We had the huge triangle that was seen in Utah. I believe that's when it started, where the military, that's their way of showing the public again, here's the technology that we have. They're not going to tell you what it is, but they show the world. And this black triangle was seen by thousands of people about 1 mile to 1.5 miles wide. And it makes no sound. These black triangles, another peculiar, amazing thing, it doesn't have any sound other than sometimes a hum people will testify to. So again, what are they relying on? It's some sort of plasma physics, anti-gravity. It's just amazing technology. And again, I argue we made the breakthroughs in anti-gravity, especially by 1953, 1954. And you know why I know that? And other researchers have agreed with this statement, if you do the research, is because we had, in the public forum, we talked, scientists talked about anti-gravity. You could read it in magazines, newspaper articles, and in the reports, in the articles, scientists were talking about how excited they were about anti-gravity breakthroughs, that they knew, they said, that spacecraft would literally, from stopped on a dime, be able to accelerate thousands and thousands of miles an hour within seconds. That's the kind of technology that we're talking about with anti-gravity, friends and fans, and the speeds. And with that technology, that is how we can get to the stars, okay? You don't get to the stars with rockets, okay, friends and fans? I mean, I get so frustrated and actually a bit angry, the fact that we have historians, space writers like Robert Zimmerman, who comes on huge radio shows like Coast to Coast Radio, and what does he talk about? All he talks about is our public space program, NASA. I mean, NASA's done some good work over the years, don't get me wrong, but it's just that, it's our public space program. NASA tries to, part of their job is to cover for the secret space program of the military-industrial complex that we have had in place, as I said, for decades and decades. Obviously, spy satellites, as we all know, are up in space from all the powerful countries, and of course, spy satellites are part of a secret space program. But I'm also talking about UFOs, spacecraft, fleets of off-field officers, in other words, a breakaway civilization that is going to the moon. Now, I could go on to a whole nother video about the famous case of Gary McKinnon, who was, he was British born, he was a hacker, he hacked in the US computers. It's a very well-known case. The United States, the military, were so upset because he had discovered that indeed one of the terms they used was off-world officers, I believe, is what he saw on some of the transcripts. He saw fleet-to-fleet transcripts of space fleets going to the moon. I mean, it was just unbelievable what he found. So, of course, since then, the United States have you know, I'm sure they've tightened up their security that much more. So anyway, the U.S. were so mad, they tried to extradite Gary McKinnon to the United States, and we're going to imprison him for over 10 or 20 years or something crazy. And luckily, the British stuck up for Gary McKinnon, and now, to make a long story short, now, just like a lot of instances, what's happening with Gary McKinnon? Well, he's working for the U.S. government now. So, good for you, Gary. You go ahead and work for the military, as long as you're not getting in trouble and shit from the military. So anyway, it's just another example, friends and fans. Sometimes the military, you know, again, they pull some real diva moves, I'll tell you. But before I talk about one of the diva moves that the military played, which I'm not very happy about, is that I mentioned rockets earlier. So Robert Zimmerman, I believe is his name, whatever I said the first time, that's his first and last name. This Zimmerman, he talks about rockets, and he'll say, oh, our rockets are so sophisticated. Are you kidding me? Rockets? Rockets is dinosaur technology, friends and fans. We all know that. I mean, come on. We've had, I said, the breakthroughs in anti-gravity was back in 1953, 1954. They were also working on anti-gravity and other propulsion systems, as I said, in the 1930s with the Bell Project, making breakthroughs back then. And we're supposed to believe, the general public, that all we have is rockets, but really sophisticated rockets. Give me a break, military. Come on. you guys got to give us access to these technologies, man. These amazing free energy. And I mean, of course, it's well documented. Thousands, literally thousands of scientists have come out with different free energies that makes the cars not have to rely on gas and electricity in our homes. A whole new free energy, and it's been suppressed many, many times. This is well known. Some scientists have even been killed. I'm not saying that's the military directly, but you know, again, there's one government, and then we have a deep state, and we have a shadow government. I mean, go research that. You can YouTube actual experts and ex-CIA people that even talk about our deep state and shadow government. I mean, Donald Trump, for example, in Congress, they're all just puppets. We all know that. Or anybody who does a little bit of research, and CNN and all these news organizations, it's all fake news. It's just American propaganda. So you got to go to alternative media sites, friends and fans, and that's what I do. And I pick out my favorite researchers, because you can't believe everything you hear. But certainly, Joseph P. Farrell, you've got to read some of his books, friends and fans. I highly recommend, and definitely go to his website, because he covers geopolitics on a weekly and daily basis. And it's just amazing. Another book that I got, friends and fans, is a book on underground bases by an author named Richard Sauder. And he documents all the bases that you can find that are documented in the United States and other countries, but especially the U.S. And then he tries to find out other bases, which, of course, most of them are not documented. There's so many secret bases we have all over the world, friends and fans. We have underground bases all over our national parks in the United States and Canada. We've got literally thousands of people, of course, that have gone missing in national parks. There's an author named David Paulides, and he writes a book called Missing 411. And he started it out with missing people in national parks, and now in his other books, he's moved to the strange disappearances in cities as well. And he has a certain criteria that him and his team look for on these disappearances in parks and cities. And in parks, for example, you know, many of the people, they go disappearing, and then their bodies are found literally a couple miles away, and in a certain time frame where there's no way the person could have gone that distance. And sometimes unfortunately, it's little kids. And sometimes they're found dead. Other times, many times, they're never found again. It's just a disappearance with very mysterious circumstances. Well, I argue that is certain factions of the military, friends and fans, that for whatever reason are making these people disappear. Sometimes killing them, sometimes just making them disappear. And I wouldn't be surprised if certain parts of the government are using these people for slave labor. And I also believe we probably got slave labor on the moon. And please, friends and fans, do your research. You may think that this is too far-fetched, what I'm saying right now, slave labor on the moon? Bases on the moon? Are you kidding me, Jason? I'm serious, friends and fans. The military are way ahead of the general public in technologies. Remember that. And they're doing amazing stuff. I give them credit with us, with human ingenuity in general, in creating these amazing technologies and the breakthroughs, again, that we've had with anti-gravity and other propulsion systems. Now, if you recall, of course, we had the stealth aircraft, right, that was invented at Lockheed Martin, one of the biggest defense contractors in all of the United States, along with Boeing. They created amazing propulsion systems and technologies like the stealth aircraft that I believe was largely responsible for winning the war in Iraq, right, with the stealth bombers. Well, Lockheed Martin was, of course, founded by Kelly Johnson. I believe that was in the 1970s, okay? And Lockheed Skunk Works, in other words, it's called, Lockheed Martin, was taken over in the 1980s by Ben Rich, who died in the 1990s. I think he took it over for about 18 years. And I bring up Ben Rich because Ben Rich, if anybody knew about their technologies and what they were capable of, it was Ben Rich, of course, because he was the head of Lockheed Martin, again, taking over from Kelly Johnson. So Ben Rich, before he died, he made some amazing speeches in front of some young people in classrooms. And one of the statements he made was that we have the technologies to take ET home back to the stars. Now, I think he was using a metaphor. Obviously, he means to take humans to the stars. And he said, we're just missing an equation, but we figured it out. And he said, it won't take a lifetime to do it. Isn't that amazing? We have the technology to take us home to the stars, friends and fans. That's the kind of technology that I'm referring to, that the military, we have. But of course, the general public, us, we don't have access to. We're not being told the truth. We're being lied to, fed disinformation, cover-ups, bullshit. And of course, you never hear on mainstream media about anti-gravity, about all the amazing propulsion systems that we have in all these black projects in the military. In the United States, I'm sure it goes on in Russia and China as well. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So Ben Rich, he also said, before he died, he said that anything in Star Wars and Star Trek that you can think of, we've either been there, done that, or we just didn't think it was even worth the time. That was his exact statements, friends and fans. Just think about that for a moment. Anything in Star Wars, Star Trek, I mean, we have the technology to do, or we didn't think it was even worth the effort. Unbelievable. He also said that anything you can think of 50 years ahead in the future, we're doing, basically is what he said. 50 years beyond what you can comprehend was his, I think, exact statement. That's what we're doing. Isn't that amazing, friends and fans? So you better believe we've been going to the moon for decades. We're still going. There's lots of minerals. Of course, whoever controls space as well controls the world. The military admits that. What better way than building bases on the moon? Again, all done in secret. China's probably up there as well. Again, this is multi-international, okay? And of course, we have a basically not only a military-industrial complex, we have a whole industrial financial complex that has been put into place, very complicated. It's been going on for decade after decade after decade, since basically the 1930s or the 1940s. And that's gone multinational as well. And it's a financial system, folks, friends and fans, in which, you know, the military, we've got drug money that's being deciphered into black projects. A lot of circumstantial evidence for that. Of course, Wall Street, you know, the banksters, just money that's disappearing from the public and the private sector. And we know this because people like Joseph P. Farrell, who's also trying to make a difference in this world, who's trying to give you his viewpoints, like I'm trying to tell you, friends and fans, from what I've learned, is that trillions of dollars go missing every year. Catherine Austin Fitts, who worked in the Bush administration, right, in the housing department. She's got the Solari report. Check her out. An amazing, amazing woman and person. Brilliant mind, brilliant accountant. And I dedicate this video as well to my brilliant friend Joe Mann. Joe, he's a brilliant accountant. And Joe had a great question. He didn't necessarily believe in a secret space program when I first mentioned it, because his first question, being an accountant, it was a great question. He said, well, how can we have a secret space program? We don't have the money. Well, this is where the trillions of dollars come in, Joe. It's all being deciphered off. Many trillions of dollars go missing. I mean, it's all...